My dear boys and girls, welcome to lesson 21. But before you look at lesson 21, we need to make a review of the previous lesson. And the previous lesson, you looked at the formula of calculating number of revolutions. And in the process of calculating number of revolutions, you stated the formula being number of revolutions equals distance out of circumference. We shall need that knowledge in order for us to work out today's work. My dear boys and girls, I want to thank you for all what you've put in to sit and write this work and always listen to the videos and do the needful as required. Right now, today, I want to look at more about revolution. Everybody, more about revolution. And more about revolution, we shall look at our number one. A bicycle wheel can cover a distance of 440 decimeters in 5 revolutions. Find the circumference of the wheel. Let's read together. A bicycle wheel can cover a distance of 440 decimeters in 5 revolutions. Find the circumference of the wheel. Now, my dear boys and girls, in this question, we need to note the following. We need to note the distance, which distance is given as 440 decimeters, and we also need to look at the number of revolutions. And the revolutions in these questions, there are 5 revolutions. And the question requires us to look for the circumference. In this situation, we shall need to borrow a leaflet from the previous lesson about how to get the circumference. Remember, there are 2 ways of looking for circumference in this question. We can use the formula, we can also use the proportions. But right now, we shall look at circumference, borrowing a leaflet from the previous lesson, being equal to distance out of number of revolution. Remember, in the previous lesson, you looked at the 3 terms. You looked at circumference, you looked at the distance, and the number of revolutions. Using the idea, the knowledge you learned in the previous lesson, we can derive the formula of getting circumference, which formula states that circumference is equal to distance out of number of revolutions. Now, our next step, my dear boys and girls, we shall substitute. Remember, our distance in the question is 440 decimeters, and the number of revolutions we have, there are 5. So looking at that, we shall substitute the distance as 440 decimeters out of 5. Looking at that, we shall need to divide. Boys and girls, 5 divided by 5, what do we come up with? Yes, someone is telling me we come up with the 1. Yes. How about 440 divided by 5? Somebody is telling me we shall come up with 88. What does it mean? Our circumference is equal to 88 decimeters. You need to note that carefully. Circumference by formula is equal to distance out of number of revolutions. Look at the distance given in the question. Substituting the formula together with the number of revolutions, then carry out correct division. Let me help you all at that point. How else can we look for circumference? I told you earlier on that there are 2 ways of looking for circumference in this situation. We can use the method of proportions. Use of proportions. What does it mean? 5 revolutions. This is use of proportions. My dear boys and girls, 5 revolutions cover 440 decimeters. 5 revolutions cover 440 decimeters. How about 1 revolution? Remember, 1 revolution is equal to circumference. 1 revolution is equal to circumference, and you looked at that in the previous lesson. 1 revolution covers 1 out of 5 times 440 decimeters. 1 out of 5 times 440 decimeters. Remember, we are looking at 1 revolution. Which distance is covered in 1 revolution? In 1 revolution, it will be 1 out of 5 times 440 decimeters. My dear boys and girls, we shall look at the concept of that, and at this stage we shall cancel We shall divide 5 by 5. Yes. What is the outcome? Somebody is telling me the outcome is a 1, which is very good. Now we shall also look at 440. 440 divided by 5. Boys and girls, we shall come up with 88 decimeters. What does it mean? One revolution covers 88 decimeters. One revolution covers 88 decimeters. But remember, we are looking for circumference. So we need to relate this, as it was taught earlier on in the previous lesson, that one revolution is equal to circumference. One revolution, my dear boys and girls, is equal to circumference. Therefore, our circumference is equal to 88 decimeters. So those are the two ways you can calculate circumference given the distance and the number of revolutions. You need to take care of those two ways. Good. My dear boys and girls, we need to proceed to the next question of number 1. We have part B of number 1. Boys and girls, we need to read together. It states, calculate the diameter of the wheel. Everybody, calculate the diameter of the wheel. Diameter of the wheel. If you can recall so well, how do we calculate diameter given circumference? Because in question 1 part A, we managed to get the circumference. So in part B, we need to calculate the diameter. But how do we get the diameter given circumference? Yes, you can remind us. Somebody is reminding us that pi d is equal to circumference, which is very good. Pi d is equal to circumference. Now, after stating the formula that pi d equals circumference, remember circumference is given. We've already found it as 88 decimeters. Pi is a constant, which pi is 22 out of 7. So what we shall have to do is to substitute. Our pi as 22 out of 7 times diameter equals 88 decimeters. In the next step, my dear boys and girls, we shall eliminate the 7 by multiplying it on both sides. We shall remove the denominator 7 by multiplying it on both sides. My dear boys and girls, at that stage we shall need to cancel. What is 7 divided by 7, everybody? Good. That one gives us a 1. How about 7 divided by 7? Good. We shall come up with a 1. 1 times 22d, this will give us 22d equals to 88 decimeters times 7. Now at this stage, my dear boys and girls, in our next stage, we shall need to carry out the division. We shall say 22d out of 22. We shall also do the same. We shall also divide by 22. Why are we dividing by 22? It's because we need to find the value of d. And remember, d is our diameter. Now, my dear boys and girls, we shall need to divide 22 divided by 22. What do we come up with? We shall come up with a 1. 22 divided by 22. My dear boys, what do we come up with? We shall come up with a 1. Yes, even on this side, we need to reduce by 22. Yes, 22 into 22. We shall 22 divide by 2. This time we are going to reduce by 2. 22 divided by 2, my dear boys and girls, we shall come up with 11. 88 divided by 2, my dear boys. Yes, you can give us the answer. Good. Somebody is telling me the answer is 44. We need to continue reducing. There is a common factor. A common factor. So we shall continue to reduce. 11 divided by 11, boys and girls, what do we come up with? Someone is telling me 1, which is very good. How about 44 divided by 11? Boys and girls, what do we come up with? Good. We shall come up with a 4. So in our next step, 1 times d, we shall come up with the diameter, which will equal to 4 times 4 decimeters times 7 decimeters as our next step. My dear boys and girls, our next step is diameter equals 4 decimeters times 7. We shall come up with our diameter being 28 decimeters. 28 decimeters. We shall have to underline the answer. We've fully answered the question 1 part A and the question 1 part B. In the question 1 part A, my dear boys, if you can recall so well, boys and girls, the question required us to find the circumference. And I gave you 2 ways of looking for circumference. The first way was the use of the formula, where circumference is equal to distance divided by the number of revolutions. And using that formula, you were all in position to come up with our circumference as 88 decimeters. We could also still look for circumference using proportions, using the knowledge of proportions. And we used the knowledge of proportions, and we came up with our circumference being 88 decimeters. So in question part B, what required us to find the diameter, which diameter we all know the formula states that given circumference, the formula becomes pi d equals circumference. And obviously, we've come up with our final answer as per this question, part B, our diameter being 28 decimeters. My dear boys and girls, we need to move on to the next question. The next question says the distance between town P, not town, the distance between point P and Q is 352 meters. The question states, calculate the radius of a tire that covers it in 400 tons in centimeters. We need to read together as a team. Let's read. The distance between point P and Q is 352 meters. Calculate the radius of a tire that covers it in 400 tons in centimeters. My dear boys and girls, in this question, we need to identify those important aspects that are going to help us work out the question. And among the important aspects, we have the distance between point P and point Q, which distance has been given as 352 meters. That point is very important. At the same time, we are required to look for the radius, and which radius is needed in centimeters, that it covers it in 400 tons. So we have the distance and we have the number of tons. So what are we meant to do? Remember, they wanted the final answer for the radius to be in centimeters, and our distance was given in meters. So what we need to do here, my dear boys and girls, is to convert the meters into centimeters. If you can recall so well, you looked at this work in primary 4, converting, changing units from meters to centimeters. You still looked at the very work in primary 5 and primary 6, and right now you're looking at the very work in primary 7. So how do we change the meters into centimeters? Yes, you can remind us. What does 1 meter equal to into centimeters? Yes, somebody is telling me 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters, which is very good and extremely correct. Now, our task is to convert the 352 meters into centimeters. We shall state 352 meters will equal to 352 times 100 centimeters. When we carry out our multiplication, we shall come up with the 352 meters being equal to 35,200 centimeters. Now the 35,200 centimeters, it's now the distance between point P and Q, but in centimeters. And we all know the reason as to why we've converted this distance into centimeters. The reason is because they want us to calculate the radius in centimeters. That's why we converted the distance from meters to centimeters. My dear boys and girls, after converting the distance into centimeters, our next target is to look for the circumference. Yes, you can remind us. I gave you 2 ways of calculating circumference. You can state for us the first way where we used the formula. My dear boys and girls, yes, what is the formula? Good. Someone is telling me circumference is equal to distance out of number of revolution. Can you all repeat that? Circumference equals distance out of number of revolution. Good. After setting the formula, we have our distance. We are going to use our distance and also the number of revolutions, and we shall substitute them in the formula. Our next step is to carry out the substitution. where circumference will equal to 35,200 centimeters out of 400. The next step, we shall cancel the zeros. Shall cancel the 2 zeros down and the 2 zeros up. Our next step is to divide by 4. Divide by 4. You can divide by 2, you can divide by 4, any. But our target here is to divide by 4. What is 4 divided by 4? We shall come up with a 1. Now we shall look at 352 using the divisibility test for 4. When is a number divisible by 4? A number is divisible by 4 if its last 2 digits are divisible by 4. My dear boys and girls, if you look at the multiples of 4, automatically 52 is a multiple of 4. That implies that 352 can be divisible by 4. Using your pens and the books you have around. Yes, what is 352 divided by 4? Somebody is telling me the answer is 88. So what does it mean? Our circumference here, our circumference is equal to 88 centimeters. But remember, in this question, they want you to calculate the radius. We've managed to come up with a circumference. We need to proceed to the next step of looking for the radius. Yes, my dear boys and girls, how do we calculate radius given circumference? We've already found our circumference as 88 centimeters. Our focus, the next focus is to look for the radius. We don't need to end here because the question requires us to look for the radius. So we need to proceed and look for the radius. My dear boys and girls, yes, may I know from you, how do we get radius given circumference? Yes, what do? Somebody is stating the formula as 2 pi r equals circumference, which is very good. 2 pi r is equal to circumference. 2 pi r is equal to circumference. We are using 2 pi r because in this question we are looking for radius. So now, having stated the formula, the next step we shall substitute. 2 times 22 out of 7, which is our pi, times the radius. This is equal to our circumference, which is 88 centimeters. My dear boys and girls, our next step, we shall multiply the 2 times 22, giving us 44, but out of the denominator, which is 7, times the radius. This is equal to 88 centimeters. In our next step, my dear boys and girls, we shall multiply throughout by 7, by the denominator, which is 7, in our next step. Now, at this very step, my dear boys and girls, having multiplied throughout by the denominator, 7 throughout, our next step, my dear boys and girls, is to cancel. My dear boys and girls, my question is, what is 7 divided by 7? Yes, somebody is telling me the outcome is 1. Good of you. 7 divided by 7, somebody is telling me the outcome is 1. Good. So in our next step, we shall have 44 times r, which gives us 44r is equal to 88 centimeters times 7. My dear boys and girls, we need to proceed. What is our next step? Remember, our target is to look for the radius. Somebody is whispering, is telling me the next step we are going to divide throughout by 44. Good. Let's look at that step where we shall have out of, but out of 44, even there out of 44. So now, our next step is to reduce. What is 44 divided by 44? Good. Somebody is telling me the outcome is 1. 44 divided by 44. Somebody is telling me the outcome is 1. That's good. So in the next procedure, we need also to cancel, to reduce on this other side of the equation. Whereby we shall go 44 divided by 44. We shall come up with a 1. How about 88 divided by 44? Somebody is telling me the answer is 2. So in our next step, we shall have our radius being equal to 2 centimeters times 7. And finally, our radius will equal to 14 centimeters. My dear boys and girls, we need to underline this. We need to underline our final answer. Now, in example 2, we had the distance in meters. which was 352 meters. And we had the number of tons. The number of tons were given as 400 tons. And in this question, they required us to look for the radius. To look for the radius. And this radius was meant to be calculated in terms of centimeters. My dear boys and girls, you need to study this example extremely well. You need to give it time. Because one, the distance was given different units, and the final answer has to be in different units. As I explained earlier on, the first step was for you people to convert the distance given into centimeters. After converting the distance, you bring in the formula for calculating circumference. After getting the circumference, it is the circumference to guide you, to lead you to the radius. And that's all about question 2. Now we need to look at the last question, which states that Peter drives a distance of 88 kilometers from town A to town B, making 40,000 revolutions. Find the diameter of the wheel in centimeters. My dear boys and girls, we need to read together. Peter drives a distance of 88 kilometers from town A to town B, making 40,000 revolutions. Find the diameter of the wheel in centimeters. You see, this question here is also a bit technical. The distance has been given in kilometers. They want us to find the diameter in centimeters. So we need to use the same trick we've applied in question 2. But remember this time, the distance between town A and town B has been given in terms of kilometers, which is 88 kilometers. So we need to convert the kilometers. We need to convert the kilometers to centimeters. How do we do it? Remember the knowledge the teachers taught you in your previous lessons, in your previous classes. The teacher stated it. Yes, who can remind us? Somebody is reminding us that 1 kilometer is equal to 100,000 centimeters. 1 kilometer is equal to 100,000 centimeters. Good. And our target is to convert the 88 kilometers. 88 kilometers will equal to, my dear boys and girls, we shall have 88 times 100,000 centimeters. Good. Finally, we shall come up with our distance between town A and town B in terms of centimeters being 8,800,000 centimeters as the distance between town A and town B. And you know the reason as to why we've converted the distance into centimeters? It's because we are required to find the diameter in centimeters. That is the reason as to why we've converted the 88 kilometers into centimeters. Now, having converted this distance into centimeters, yes, who can remind us? We have the distance in centimeters and also we have the number of revolutions. What is our next step? Yes, who can remind us? Somebody is telling me the next step. We should look for circumference, which is excellent. We should look for circumference. And remember, we had 2 ways of looking for circumference: use of the formula and also using the number of proportions. But this time we shall use the number. We shall use the formula. Circumference equals distance out of number of revolution. Everybody, circumference equals distance out of number of revolution. Number of revolution. Now, my dear boys and girls, our next step we shall substitute, and our circumference will equal to our distance 8,800,000 centimeters out of 40,000. Out of 40,000. Remember, when we look at our denominator here, we have 4 zeros. We shall cancel the 4 zeros. And we shall also cancel the 4 zeros from our denominator. Good. Our next step, we need to identify that common factor that can divide out the 2 numbers. And so, we shall cancel 4. 4 divided by 4, our outcome will be a 1. We've used 4 as a common factor to divide out 880 by 4. So we shall look at 880 divided by 4. My dear boys and girls, what is the outcome? Somebody has whispered that the answer is 220. So our circumference, my dear boys and girls, becomes 240 centimeters. It it becomes 240 centimeters. But remember, in this question, we are required to look for diameter. So what do? We shall look for diameter. Yes, somebody is telling me diameter, pi d equals circumference. Next step, we shall substitute. 22 out of 7d will equal to 220 centimeters. So we are going to multiply throughout in the next step by 7. So my dear boys and girls, we need to cancel at this stage. 7 into 7. Yes, what is the outcome? Somebody has whispered the outcome is a 1. How about 7 divided by 7? The outcome, 1. Good of you. So we need to proceed to the next step. That is 22d being equal to 220 centimeters times 7. We shall, at this very stage, carry out our division. What shall we divide with? 22. Even this other side, we shall divide by 22. Now, by 22 here, my dear boys and girls, we shall come up with a 1. Good. How about 22 divided by 22? Somebody has told me the answer is a 1. Then the next one shall cancel by 22. The answer is a 1. How about at that stage? 220 divided by 22. What is the answer? Somebody has told me the answer is 10. So in our next step, we shall have our diameter being equal to 10 centimeters times 7. Finally, our diameter becomes 70 centimeters. We shall underline our answer as usual. My dear boys and girls, I want to thank you for this time, for being good listeners. Take care. Take time and do other work. I wish you well. Bye-bye.